Hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here with a review of Prince Vekar and Xborg figures from Power Rangers Super Megaforce. So previously people were pronouncing his name Vekar. I'm just going to say Vekar because that's what he said in the show, but whatever. So these are two figures that have recently been spotted amongst the regular 5-inch line. I don't know if they're necessarily considered a second wave, but they're here. Prince Vekar is sort of like the main villain right now who's sort of commanding everyone, and these are obviously the henchmen of this year. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll go over Vekar first, who is Vrak's brother. He's a pretty solid figure, I have to say. Articulation-wise, he pretty much shares a similar base mold to the regular 5-inch figures, but he's kind of hindered by all of his sort of, you know, flappy parts. His arm here is on a nice hinge joint, so you can get some forward movement, some nice back movement, and some upward movement. You can see here it's a bit hindered by his shoulder pad, so that's the main hindrance there. And his arms do have a single elbow joint here. His legs are also on a pretty nice hinge joint. You can get some forward movement. The back movement's pretty hindered by these flaps here, and as is the sideways movement, but it is possible. And you have the single knee joint here. His waist does not move at all. You can see that that's one solid piece. And his head, I believe it is possible to move it, but you really can't between the design of his head and his collar, so you really can't get very many different, you know, head turn looks. So you pretty much are, or at least maybe some other people's might be a little more flexible where you could move it a little bit, but mine is pretty inflexible, and I'm pretty much stuck having him look in one direction. I don't know, I was gonna make a joke about one direction there, and then I decided to let it go. I let it go, guys. But yeah, pretty much the same base articulation, is just kind of hindered by some stuff. He does not have any loose joint problems, which is pretty nice. I don't have to worry about that. Detail-wise, he's pretty solid. He is missing some paint, and he does look a little bit basic. This is basic stuff, guys, but I still think that they did a pretty nice job on it. His head sculpt isn't bad. You pretty much got his face what it looks like. The paint is, like I said, pretty basic. You got the blue here and the white and the silver, and it all looks pretty fine. Here's sort of his medals here. And it does look a bit plain, but I honestly think it's a pretty solid looking figure. There is a Figuarts version for this guy. I did not pick him up because honestly, his Japanese counterpart and, well, himself in Power Rangers are really not one of my favorite villains that I wanted to pick up. You've kind of got these little scarves here which are pretty flexible. As you can see, they really didn't affect the articulation all that much. So you got those. But yeah, I mean, pretty much basic details. He could have a little bit more. You know, if you look at pictures of him, he does have a bit more detail to him. But it's pretty solid. One of my main complaints about the figure, which just seems kind of stupid though, is you got these tassels here coming from his legs, his hands, and they're always in the down position as if he's just standing like this, which can look kind of awkward, you know, if you have it up like this, in which case they would naturally fall, or even like this, in which they would naturally fall. It makes him kind of look like he's got cannons. I think the Figuarts sort of had a similar problem, but I believe they had, you know, swappable pieces. But still, it looks kind of funny. It's such a minor thing, and like, you know, kids and whatnot won't notice it, but it is just kind of stupid in that manner. But other than that, there's really not too much. The only thing I feel like mentioning is the hands can move. Like 360, you can move them, but I really don't know what purpose that would serve. But if you get underneath the tassels, they can move. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with them. He's not the most detailed figure ever, but I really enjoy him. I think he's a pretty solid figure. He's a pretty good representation for it, and he's certainly a lot cheaper than the Figuart, and you can just go down and pick him up at Target. Just for a quick comparison, here he is next to his brother, Vrak. This is from the 4-inch Megaforce line, so as you can see, there's quite a height difference there, so maybe this will play into their brother storyline. He's just so mad that he's so much shorter. But you know, I have to give it to them. It was pretty clever noticing that you know, his first form does kind of share a sort of aesthetic similarity to Vekar, so tying those two seasons villains together ended up working. I really dug how they did that, and you can see that there, but you can see there's quite a size difference. Alright, so now taking a look at the Xborg, which are the main henchmen of this series, or Super Megaforce, of the Armada. Articulation-wise, he is pretty much the same mold. Unfortunately, with this figure, I do have some loose joint problems. His arms are all fine. You get a pretty solid range of movement here. Nice hinge joint. You got the single elbow joint here for moving. It looks like he's at a rally. His head can move around 360. His is actually more movable. No real up and down movement. His legs are on a nice hinge joint. This one is super loose. Which is really annoying. I actually had a really hard time getting him posed for the review. But you do have a solid range of motion, as you can see, based on the hinge joint and your single knee joint here. You can swivel him pretty much at the ankle as well. And he does come with just this weapon, which isn't anything, can't let go of it, anything special. It's just like a little club, but it's got some nice little details in there, and it looks pretty accurate. There's not really a whole lot to do with it. It's not like it's a hugely special weapon that they needed to pay attention to, but yeah. So unfortunately, the loose joint problem is annoying. You might not necessarily find that with yours. I know a lot of people are wanting to army build, as they usually do with these. I think I'm going to pick up maybe just one more to have like one on each side of a car, just because he looks kind of pathetic alone. But so you might pick up one that has terribly loose joints, and you might pick up one that's fine. So it's just kind of a random thing that happens, which happens in a lot of figures. He is the first out of all of my Super Megaforce figures that have that problem. And detail-wise, he's pretty basic. As you can see, the main core of his body is gray. But they did a really good job on his head sculpt, I think. They got some really nice details in there. You know, you can hardly even tell they have a face sometimes, and if you know, look at the pictures. It looks really nice, I have to say, and the paint looks really good. It's got a nice shine to it. It looks like sort of a weathered metallic plastic here. It continues here on the chest. So, very good job on that. I think they did a very solid job on that. I love the weathered look they gave it. It's got a nice shine to it, but that's really the only two detail spots on his body are his helmet and his chest. I mean, you do have his like wrists here and stuff, but the majority of his body is just kind of this gray plastic with a little bit of textures in it, which is nice that they did get the textures in it. They very easily could have just made him straight up gray. So yeah, they did a very nice job on it. I think it's a nice looking figure. Like I said, I'm just a bit disappointed that he does have that loose joint problem, because it makes it a bit harder to work with. But look-wise, he's pretty solid. I really dig the figure, and I think it would look good for those that like to army build, and I do look forward to getting a second one. I'm going to kind of have to force him to stand here in more of a straight-up position. There's really not much reason other than they're both henchmen, but here is just a quick comparison to last year's henchmen, which were loogies. As you can see, the scale difference. There's not really as much of a reason to compare them because they're not brothers, but I just thought I would while I'm doing it. Now I'm just trying to get him to stand, which is just really annoying. But overall, these are still both pretty solid figures. I think he's the better of the two in terms of loose joints, but they're both really solid figures. It's always nice to get villain figures. They just kind of vary things up a little bit. So I think if you're wanting an Xborg or an army of Xborgs, it's a very nice looking figure, and there's a chance yours won't have the loose joint problem, so I think that they look really good on display. And he's a really solid Vekar figure, and I think if you don't want to get the figure art, then it's a fairly solid substitute in terms of it being quite a bit cheaper since he was an exclusive. So yeah, the only real problems I have or randomly with his tassels, he could use a bit more detail, and his joints are loose. But other than that, there's two pretty solid figures, and if you are a fan of these designs or just want villains for your collection, I still can recommend them. They're both solid figures. Well, except for Xborg, he's definitely not solid. You know what I mean. I don't even know where I'm going with that. I just started randomly talking, and I apologize for my sudden and violent outburst. But anyway, until next time, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and check out the crazy podcast at writersrangersrambles.com. Until next time, it's Awesome Writer, signing out.